Test 1, 2. Test 1, 2. Test 1, 2. Howdy, everyone. Lanzer, this is SANDDAO podcast episode 66, a wrap up of the Foundation Company miniseries that we've been on. It's been quite a bit of little time since I've done an episode, mostly as I've holiday season, different things like that. Now I feel it's time to wrap up our miniseries after our last interview with the Foundation director. And I've got myself a nice old red going on here. So this one's just going to be an easy, laid back, kind of like a summary version of all the episodes, which will be a summary of all the facts that we've come across and a little bit of Q&A if there is any, and if not, then we'll end the episode. Disclaimer: I do not represent the Sandbox game or the Sandbox Foundation. I'm not your financial or legal advisor, and nothing I say is to be taken as financial or legal advice. When I say the word SIP, I mean Sandbox Improvement Proposal. When I say the word DAO, I mean decentralized autonomous organization. And when I say SandFam, I'm talking about the Sandbox community, those who participate in the people, product, and purpose of the Sandbox ecosystem. That ecosystem looks a little bit like this. In the people side, you have everything from gamers to Sandbox team. Product, you have everything from the game client to the DAO. Purpose is what was described in the white paper and expanded upon by the founders, Sebastian Bourget, Arthur Madrid, also from Animoca Brands, Yatsu. That's what makes the ecosystem go round and round every day. Today's episode is on the DAO. I'm your host, Lanzer. I've been a landowner, sandbox gamer, experienced publisher for a few years now. I run the Meta Worlds team, and since our last episode, I got the privilege to win and deliver on SIP number 32 of the DAO, which was building the DAO Education Hub. Right now, it's located in 2 minus 154 and owned by the Sandbox DAO account. And here you can see we built kind of like an education hub where it teaches you about the DAO, all the different parts of the DAO, the structure, ecosystem, the SIP payments, the process itself, and many other things like that. And I had a blast building it with Dankoi and Creative Crawler Studio. They were awesome to work with, loved it. And if you want to find it, like I said, it's in 2 154, right to the top right of Jurassic Park. It was a grand success when we tested it with I think over 61 people live when we did the testers with the testing community with the streamers, um, and like Panda, Kami, and the rest of the team, and I loved it. So it's available, it's live, and if you want to learn about the DAO in a gamified way, please visit the DAO Education Hub, which is now hosted on the Sandbox DAO account. You can find it near Jurassic Park World. So today's agenda. Let's go over today's agenda. We're going to do a summary of all of the parts that that this was makes up the Foundation Company miniseries, starting with episode 34, which I didn't realize it at the time. I thought that would just be a random, like one and done episode. Turned out that was part one of what, if you were to count them all, a 9-part series. But as you can see up there it says part 7 because I didn't realize that episode 34 was part one. And by the time I realized it, I had already started part one with episode 56 and then 57, 59, 60. So, and the wrap up would be, part 9. So if you were to really count it, Dow Birth was really part one, but I don't want to go back and change all of that. So it's part 0, part one, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then the wrap up series. So episode 34 was a look into the Sandbox DAO origin. And then episode 56, there was quite a stretch of time there where we interviewed other people like the DAO delegates on different DAO updates. And then in episode 56, we did a whole reading of the Cayman Island law behind foundation companies. Then in episode 57, we had an Ernest, who is a practicing American lawyer. We did a review of case law developing in California and Texas and how DAO law happened within or is happening within America, United States. Then episode 59, we got to interview 2 practicing DAO lawyers in the Grand Cayman Islands from Walker's Global. And then episode 60, we did a whole reading of the Sandbox DAO documents, the articles, the memorandum, and the bylaws. Then episode 62, we did the same thing for Star Atlas, which itself is also a foundation company. I was elected to the council about 12 months ago, and I was just recently reelected again. And I love Star Atlas. It had a very similar structure, so I did a reading of at their memorandum and articles in order to compare. Then in episode 64, we did a Q&A with return from Carolyn from Walker's Global, which is an international law firm, We did a Q&A with her for all of the remaining questions we had from episode 34 to 62. There were a few questions we wanted answered. And then finally, awesome episode 65 with Glenn from Leeward Management, who is an acting director, an actual director in the Grand Cayman Islands. We got to interview him. What the day and the life of foundation director is. And here we are, episode 66, the wrap up of everything. So we're going to do a very brief summary of all of them, and then we'll wrap up. So here's our summary. We started first with SANDDAO episode 34, which I call part 0, clocked in at 3 hours long. That's when I knew for certain that this was not going to be just a one and done. When it took 3 hours and we didn't get through everything I want to get through, I sorely underestimated how much time it would take to do all that. So it was a look into the Sandbox DAO origins. How did it begin? And I built this relationship map after many, many hours of research, like probably more than 10 hours of Googling, all sorts of stuff to try and figure this out. Searching business licenses and registrations, all public knowledge. It was just findable there. And we tried to unearth how did the DAO come together. And this is what I came up with. It basically went over, how the foundation related to the roles within the foundation, how that worked with the SIPs, what role Arasakio played in the DAO itself, how the Sandbox company was connected to Animoca Brands, which was connected to Ape Foundation through Yatsu, and how actually the DAO team itself was kind of connected to ApeCoin DAO, which ApeCoin DAO has since stood down and stopped running as of last year. So we went through all of that. I know I didn't get everything right. Like I think I got the Fleet Collective's involvement wrong. I don't think they were quite as involved as I had originally thought it was, but I got most of it right. And we were able to in episode 63 when we interviewed Cyril, who is the current DAO administrator for the Sandbox DAO. When we interviewed him, we were able to really delve into this part of the relationship map and figure out how things worked with him and the DAO. You know, how was progressive decentralization coming along? What was his perspective on the relationship between the foundation and the DAO? How has it evolved since he became the administrator? Was his involvement with the foundation and the DAO and the Sandbox company and his overall view for DAO performance? We right here, this SIP 123, I called my triangle of confusion, which was very confusing for a long time. It even evolved into the rectangle of confusion. We didn't figure out what all this was about until some episodes later. But interviewing Cyril, it was so cool. I'd been wanting to do that for a really long time, and I really appreciated how he helped educate and bring insight into what it was like running a DAO. We also delved into the curious part of how all of the DAO players, a lot of them, were all within 10 minutes driving distance of each other on the Grand Cayman Islands. At first, I thought that was really weird, really suspicious. But in later episodes, especially episode 56, we discovered that there were some really good reasons why that was happening and how that was like the business district of the Grand Cayman Islands. The Grand Cayman Islands is not that big of an island and smaller than Jamaica, for instance. And in the end, all of those different players had a part to play in the compliance of Grand Cayman Island law in providing different services like management, director, secretary, legal, and they just all were near each other because that was where commerce is on South Street in Georgetown. So, where we thought maybe there was a conspiracy afoot, that we were able to figure out by episode 56 that that was not the case. And by episode 65, when we interviewed the director, absolutely not. There's definitely, I think we put that to rest. So, that was that leads us into the next episode after episode 34, was episode 56. That clocked in at 4 hours. And boy, was I in trouble there. Um, that was what thought was going to be one episode with episode 34. So you can already tell that we're at 7 hours worth of content just right there. Episode 56 was a reading of the Cayman Island law. What it was it that required all of these compliance things within a foundation company in the Grand Cayman Islands? Turns out there's quite a bit of reading we had to do, a lot of research, and first thing we did was look through the Cayman Islands General Registry. We kind of saw a visual overview of what types of companies there were, and then how the foundation, the Sandbox DAO, was a foundation company. It was exempt, and where did that fit in the hierarchy of things within the Cayman Islands? Then, after we kind of did an overview like that, we looked into the law regulation stack, where all the laws that were pertinent to a foundation company, such as the Companies Act, the Foundation Companies Act, all the case law that was trying to develop around it, mostly dispute resolution stuff. So, how do you interpret the law when two people disagree over what it says? And then the Companies Management Act, the Directors Registration and Licensing Act, the Citation of Acts Parliament Act even had a role to play, in changing all the laws to acts. The Virtual Asset Service Provider Act, the Securities Investment Business Act. So all of these things we read through in order to figure out how they played a part in a foundation company. And by the end of episode 65, we had to expand that into a commercial interpretation, such as what did the law firm say about that, like Walker's Global? And what did a professional director have to say about that, which was Glenn from Leeward Management? We ended up hitting a lot of these laws and multiple times throughout the parts, and really did an awesome an episode 56 that really did shed a lot of light on why we were seeing so many things within a foundation company. Why were there so many different services being involved? It was really helpful. I highly recommend that episode just because of how deep we delved into it and how much it revealed about a foundation company. Then I tried my hand at creating a flow chart of how is a DAO company, a foundation company born and what happens afterwards. It was my best guess. And episode 56, I had just read all of those hundreds of pages from the laws over here. And then I tried my hand at what happens when a DAO wants to become a foundation company, selecting, and I pulled from the laws and regulations to figure that out and selecting persons, uh, then figure out who is going to provide the corporate services, all the licensing that was required. And then what I didn't know was what happened day to day. And that was where I originally described this as my triangle of confusion over here. When SIPs 1, 2, and 3, how did that govern the relationships of all of these people? And after I read all the laws, I didn't get any closer to that. So I called it my rectangle of confusion because I still didn't know how everyone played together and what the rules were. We did later on figure out in episode 64, we were able to expand that to be a little more accurate, where SEMA didn't play a role in this. The DAO selected service providers in the beginning to include legal services. Director provides director services, and that's when you draft the memorandum and articles, you register, and then you create the company. And also, there's the auditor and the chairman involved in all of this. We were able to figure out a lot more what everyone was doing and how they all interacted with each other. So, really enjoy the discussion with Melissa and Carolyn. And then we started piecing together, and by the end of episode 56, we had a pretty good idea of what all of these terms meant when we were reading them in our DAO, in the Sandbox DAO. What did articles of association mean? What did memorandum of association mean? What did a foundation company mean? What did it mean to be limited by guarantee or without any share capital? Why was the Cayman Island government involved in this? Even the $50 stamp, we figured out where that was. Where that was cited, and what it was a subscriber, and what role did the assistant registrar play? And we delved into the acts and regulations, and we did a lot. By the end of it, I was able to put together a TLDR of what all of this meant in episode 56. And by episode 65, we were able to expand that to be a little bit more accurate as to what was happening. So, what we ended up with here was a foundation company is both the name of the Sandbox DAO and a type of company in the Grand Cayman Islands. It is flexible in how it's structured and operates. What is an exempted company? It means a company that does business outside the Cayman Islands. What does limited by guarantee mean? It means the members of the foundation company can only lose what they put in the company. What does without any share capital mean? It means no shares or units, otherwise known as units of ownership, were created when the company was formed. Articles and memorandum of association. A memo creates the foundation company. Articles describe how it will be operated. And the bylaws, which we didn't realize what part they played, but the bylaws establish internal business rules, like when meetings, what happens in meetings, how do the roles all work together. We looked up how much business was being done in the Cayman Islands. 1,000 companies registered in 1 month alone. And a year later, now in this past September 2025, over 1,000 companies registered. So the trend is up for them. But it looks like the active companies in quarter three 2024 remained the same at 121,000, as did quarter three in 2025 a year later. And that's mostly because as many companies were created, also were dissolved. Foundation roles are flexible and varied. A subscriber will create the foundation company, a director will lead it, secretary is licensed to document, record, certify, members, founders, officers, supervisors, managers all conduct daily activities. And a foundation company is governed by Grand Cayman Island law, mostly through the Companies Act and the Foundation Companies Act. So we are able to get more specific and also more accurate in our TLDR after episode 65. Then we went on to episode 57 after episode 56. So episode 57 was a review of United States of America case law surrounding DAOs and also DAO law in different states. We had on Ernest, who runs board counsel and also board legal. He is a fellow ape, and he was able to help shed some light as a practicing attorney himself. Then the interview clocked in about 2 hours. We went over some of the recent court rulings at the time, such as Aoki DAO getting sued by a U.S. regulator, BZX DAO getting sued by a DAO token holder, Lido DAO being sued by a non-DAO token holder, and all the some of it's still ongoing. But some things that were coming out was that a person can be sued as an unincorporated association under U.S. California state law. A DAO can be sued as a person, is what I mean to say there. Also, that people within the DAO may unintentionally create a partnership where their actions intended to engage elite in business together, so they could be sued and then be liable for each other's actions in the DAO. Hence, one of the reasons why a company is needed, and we'll go over that later. And Lido DAO, where DAO members were being treated as general partners, which meant in some cases unlimited liability. You know, I mean, um, if someone did something in the DAO, you could be liable for it because in one instance you created a partnership, whether you intended to or not. So that's some pretty significant stuff. And then we started delving into all the different DAO law in different states, primarily Tennessee, Wyoming, Vermont, or Utah. And this is where we started getting into what a DAO company was, like a foundation company. And then we likened it to the castle and the moat. So the castle is the DAO. And inside the castle, we do all DAO things. We're DAOing. We vote, we discuss, all of that. The company, the DAO company, is what's known as the wrapper. That acts as the moat, that moat around the castle that protects it. And the thing to know is that the moat is not the same thing as the castle. They are two separate things, two different objectives and purposes, and they do not answer to each other in the same way that, well, they don't answer to each other. So it's important to know the difference between the castle, which is where we do our DAOing, and the moat, which is the company that protects it. And we get into that a little bit more when we interview our lawyers from the Grand Cayman Islands. We delved into Utah and how they take a for profit approach called a LLD, Limited Liability Decentralized Autonomous Organization, whereas Wyoming took a more unincorporated nonprofit approach known as a DUNA, Decentralized Unincorporated Nonprofit Association. Vermont took an LLC approach. They called it the BBLLC, Blockchain Based Limited Liability Company. And Tennessee just revised some of their LLC law to include DAOs. Then we did some honorary mentions of some crypto decisions every lawyer needed to know. We went through the SEC investigative report as well as their framework. And last, we left with how do regulators have jurisdiction over international entities, groups, and actions? Because we saw in the case law how some people were being sued outside of the US and some entities were. And that's where Ernest kind of gave some insight and education on what the long arm statute was, the conducts and effects test, and the Dodd Frank Act, and how all of those contributed to U.S. regulators being able to do that. It was a great episode. I thank Ernest very much for it. After 57, we went to episode 59, and that is where we were able to get a briefing from two lawyers from Walker's Global, who are two practicing lawyers for DAOs in the Grand Cayman Islands. Clocked in about an hour and a half long, and this was very much a briefing orientation. I didn't do much interviewing, they did educating. They came prepared with a whole PowerPoint presentation. Melissa and Carolyn did, and they explained this as if we were a client of theirs, and it was really eye opening, very educational. So we went over things like why would a DAO wish to use a Cayman entity, like such things as regulatory certainty, crypto friendly, Cayman Islands is tax neutral jurisdiction, and other things. We also went over why would a DAO form a Cayman Island foundation company? Because it fits for the decentralized ethos. It can be memberless. It can be very unique and flexibly structured, and it acts as a shield of liability for the DAO, which is that moat that we were talking about that protects the castle. Then we went over in a timeline of events as to what happens when a DAO is created. A foundation company is created. First with the incorporation, then it stays director led, meaning the director makes most of the decisions. And as decentralization or progressive decentralization takes hold, it then converts over to a token holder led, where the token holders do most of the decision making. And then we went more into the timeline as to how the token holder governance mechanics are set out in the bylaws, the importance of the bylaws. So that's when earlier we were in the here in the flow chart we added things such as bylaws and in the TLDR as well. We were updating it based on a lot of what we were seeing in here in episode 59. Then we went over what documents were required to form a foundation company, the affidavit, the memorandum, and the articles, and then all the subscriber artifacts that need to be submitted to the Cayman Islands government. Then we went over different activities that a Cayman Foundation company can do, such as minting and issuing tokens, private sales or airdrops, treasury management of tokens and stablecoins, administering programs or bounties, executing service and agreements and consulting agreements, so signing contracts, and trading. And then we went over a little bit about the legal framework, like the VASP Act, and how that may or may not have been applicable to different DAOs, and needing to be registered with different monetary authorities, like mostly dealing with know your customer (KYC) or AML, anti money laundering laws. And it was a wonderful conversation. Absolutely loved talking to Melissa and Carolyn. If they seemed very very knowledgeable and very experienced in DAO law and running or advising foundation companies. So I highly recommend take a look if you have any DAO needs in the Cayman Islands. from Walker's Global, Melissa and Carolyn both were very knowledgeable. I enjoyed speaking with them. After episode 59, we then went into episode 60. And this one was the most surprising of all of them. Not because when we read the Sandbox DAO Foundation documents, mostly the articles, the memorandum, and the bylaws, we had already looked at them mostly as a DAO. But when I read them, what I didn't expect is that it would take 6 hours long. 6 hours it took me to go through all of that, which blows my mind. But I was committed at that point, so I might as well have just finished it. So I did. We did a read through of the memorandum, the articles, and essentially the bylaws. It's mislabeled as the Constitution. It's not the Constitution. That means something else in the foundation company law, and not that. So we're talking about the bylaws there. In the memorandum and article of association, you could find that in SIPs number 1 and 2. In SIP 1, if you just scroll down under the description, you'll see the link to the DAO Constitution. Like I said, it's supposed to be the bylaws according to Foundation Company law. But in SIP 2, if you scroll down to the very bottom, you'll see Articles of Association and Memorandum of Association, where you can click those and read them. In the Memorandum of Association, we read through all of it. And then we had some questions at the end, like, did the VASP Act apply to the foundation company? Because it had words like digital asset and stuff. Did the securities law, that's the wrong word. Hold on a second. The Securities Investment Business Act apply from the Grand Cayman Islands? Who are the beneficiaries? Is it SanFam? Is it someone else? Turns out it's not SanFam. Who's the founder? Wasn't able to really fully figure that one out. But we were able to read through all of it and then understand how things were run at that level. Then we went into the Articles Association and read through it, and things like it read out who the director was, and that had a connection earlier when we were talking about who were the key players in uh, in the relationship map. So they're, IPNA over here and ICSL. What roles did they have to play in all of this? And did the initial subscriber become the founder or director? We don't really know. And then is the special counsel or advisory board considered members? Turns out they're not. And all other things that we talked about. Then we went into the bylaws, not the Constitution, and read all of it, and just had some questions there about why 3 consecutive terms only, why was the advisory board able to be removed, stuff like that. And just it was a good reading of the thing that dictates how the foundation company is run. Then we did an entity search where we kind of checked into the rubber stamps on the articles in the memorandum, trying to figure out how the Sandbox Foundation was registered. If you want to pay that $60 there, then you could get more details about that because it's open. All you have to do is just create an account. Then we looked into the Grand Cayman Islands General Registry and looked at the authorization code to figure out if it was still valid. It was. Everything checked out. Then we did we did a little bit of research into some of like the Maples group and the ICSL, and was able to find some connections there to registrations on the relationship map that I showed you a little earlier. And then we took a little bit of a detour to figure out how that related to the ApeCoin DAO, because some of my fellow apes were asking if I could look into ApeCoin DAO, what I could find there. We did find some things on Bridgestream and Webslinger and Ape Foundation itself. And then we wrapped up the episode. So that was episode 60, a reading of the Sandbox DAO documents. Then I got into Star Atlas, and Star Atlas also is a foundation company, and I ended up running for DAO Council, as I mentioned earlier, and I'm currently elected to the DAO Council, which is kind of like an equivalent of the Sandbox DAO Special Counsel. And so I did a reading of their documents. It clocked in at 4 hours, so it still too was quite long. They have a little bit more documentation when it comes to their DAO. So they have not only just a white paper like Sandbox does, but also they have a DAO specific sustainable governance framework. They also have an economics paper which talks about the economy of Star Atlas and how the DAO is a part of that. So we did those readings of those things. And then we found the memorandum and articles in their Discord, also in their Git book. So if you go in the knowledge base under our structure, you'll see the memorandum and the articles down there. If you scroll down to where the memorandum of association header is, or in DAO Discord in the DAO chat, you'll see it was attached there. So that was cool. We went through the memorandum. It was similarly structured like the Sandbox Foundation was. But one thing we did notice is that Star Atlas Foundation didn't have a founder. So that was really interesting. Turns out that's because of the differing interpretations by legal counsel. So like Walker's Global or Alberga Thorpe. They had differing interpretations, and then the people who created the foundation company acted on it in different ways. Um, that's something we learned when reading the Foundation's Company Act, that there was some flexibility. There's a lot of flexibility in how you could create a foundation company. So then we went into some questions about the director, the objects, members, beneficiaries. Did the vast back apply to Star Atlas Foundation? And why did it see 7 members? So all of those things we looked into. Then in the articles, we started looking into the Star Atlas Council, their local board committees, supervisors, directors, and trying to figure out what meeting notices meant and all of that and special resolutions. We then did a little bit of an interpretation exercise where we took some of the really heavily worded legal jargon and tried to piece together what it was trying to say. So we took like all the nouns, verbs, adverbs, and pieced together what this really long paragraph was trying to tell us, what it authorized people to do. That was a lot of fun. I enjoyed that. Then we, just like in the Sandbox Foundation, we did a document search for the Star Atlas and verified that it too was stamped properly. Then we looked at the entity search, saw that Leeward Management, which was the company hired to run the Star Atlas DAO, led by Glenn, verified their status, and yeah, awesome. I loved it. That was episode 62. Episode 64 clocked in at an hour. Carolyn returned from Walker's Global to answer and finish some Q&A with Cayman Islands. From again, Carolyn is a Cayman Islands lawyer practicing in the Grand Cayman Islands and advises DAOs. So she came back and we answered questions like, what's the relationship between the DAO and the foundation company? What's the legal authority that the foundation company has over the DAO? And what is the director of fiduciary of? Is it the objects, the members, the beneficiaries? Turns out it's the objects. And then we got into a lot more questions: token holders, members, secretaries, the foundation company law itself, how AIPs, PIPs, and SIPs get ratified, and then we updated the flowchart. So the flowchart started in episode 56 up here, my best guess. And by the end of episode 64 with Carolyn, we were able to update quite a bit of it here in green. And it was awesome. I loved it. That was episode 64. Then we did episode 65. One of my favorites episode. One of my favorite episodes. Probably was my favorite episode. We were able to interview an actual director, Glenn from Leeward Management. Glenn is the director of Star Atlas DAO and Foundation Company. Not the DAO itself, which is the castle, the Foundation Company, which is the moat. So Glenn was director of the moat, basically the castle defenses, as the foundation director of the Star Atlas Foundation Company. And we interviewed him. I loved it. It was my favorite interview. Really close with Mel and Melissa's interview. But this one, because this is an acting director who manages foundation companies in the Grand Cayman Islands for DAOs on a daily basis. So we looked into, like, what does a director do? What does it look like to a day in the life of a director? What misconceptions exist about the director's role? And what responsibility does a foundation company have to the DAO? Then we went into a lot of other questions. I highly recommend watching that episode. If you want to know how DAOs work legally, look at episode 65, 64, and 60, 59. Look at 59. Yeah, look at 59, 64, and 65, and you'll get a really good idea of how foundation companies work in the Grand Cayman Islands. So we went through all of that with Glenn. Uh, very, very grateful for his time. We were able to update the TLDR that we started in 56, episode 56, to a more precise, accurate version in 65. Also, Carolyn and Melissa had some help in that too. So by the end of it, Glenn was it was very gracious of him to give his time for that. I highly recommend it. If you have needs of a foundation director, I think look no further than Leeward Management. Take a look at them and see if they're a good fit for you. But working with Glenn has been a real pleasure, and I enjoyed speaking with him. And there we go. That's the summary. That's a summary of all of the parts that we went through. And I'm almost done with my bold red here. Starting in episode 34, we did a look into the TSP DAO origin. Episode 56, we did a reading of the Cayman Island law. Episode 57, we did a review of United States of America case law and DAO law with Ernest, our practicing American attorney. Then we had a brief from Cayman Island lawyers in episode 59. Then we did a reading of the Sandbox DAO documents in episode 60. And episode 64, we changed over to reading the Star Atlas DAO documents, both the articles, memorandum, and bylaws for both DAOs. And then in episode 64, we did a Q&A with practicing Cayman Island lawyers, Melissa and Carolyn from Walker's Global. Episode 65, we did an interview with the practicing foundation director in the Grand Cayman Islands, Glenn from Leeward Management. And now here we are, episode 66, summary and wrap up. All in all, 22 hours of content. If you count today, so it's going to be about another hour, that's 23 hours long. This miniseries, this 9-part miniseries took 23 hours of just recording. Probably another 20 hours of researching, but 23 hours of actual streaming and podcasting, which was an insane amount of time. But I learned so much. And it's mostly, right? It's mostly episode 62 and episode 60's fault. Mostly 60, clocking in at 6 hours. Ridiculous. But we did it for a good cause. So 23 hours worth of podcasting content. And we really learned a lot. We pretty much learned everything we needed to know about from a token holder's perspective, what happens at the DAO legal level, what happens at the DAO director level, how do all those companies or how all those positions work together. And there you have it. There you have it. money in the chat says blame 60. That's right. That's exactly right. See if it pops up. Does it pop up on the stream? My little trying to make his comment pop up. Money, appreciate you tuning in. But yeah, blame episode 60 for sure. There it is. Blame 60. Absolutely. Okay. Oh dear. How do I whoops. If you're watching the video right now, you're saying Money's Blame 60 comment just splash screening everything. There we go. All right. So let's take a gander. We're done now, and we're gonna outro soon. Let's take a look. We are at episode 66 down here in the bottom right, where the Foundation Company wrap up is. And we have a few more episodes that I think I want to do before I may or may not shut down the podcast. We'll see. But I very nearly got to interview Yatsu, who's a special council member. Our schedules just didn't line like I really wanted to, but we're still working on it. Still talking with his assistant in order to find a good time to schedule that interview. I don't think I'm gonna get to this sniping of a fellow ape, where other side took a Guinness World Record. They took a Guinness World Record that I had helped break 10 years ago after I mentioned it in the forums. It's old news at this point. I don't need to really go over it, but this one over here, where it was most players online in an FPS battle. See if I can. There we go. Yep. Most players online. We did it. It was taken by Other Side with 2,000 players. So congratulations to them. It was a job well done. They definitely earned that. Whereas before it was Planet Side, and it was about 1,100 players that we had broken it with 10 years ago in 2015. And then we broke it again in 2019, 2020, something like that. And yeah, it was PlanetSide 2. We'd held it for a long time. And Yuga Labs with Other Side broke it. And big congratulations to them. But the timing was just a little strange after I mentioned it, uh, in order to help another ape who had successful AIP in in breaking a Guinness World Record of their own. So in order to help them, I listed my resume experience, one of which was that, and then a long series of events happened where interviews with Yuga leadership turned into them wanting to break the world record like a couple months later after I said that, and they did, and I'm breaking it. So there we go. I don't know if I'll be able to get around to interviewing Mo. Our schedules just have not been able to align on that. I really wanted to, but it might not happen. And then I want to do an episode on the sandbox ecosystem and the DAO. But I may end up just ending with Sandbox DAO 2026 update. So I've been working on that a little bit, and we'll see. We're still waiting on whether or not special council elections will happen. I really want that to happen. I want to run for it. I want to make a difference, just like I'm doing in Star Atlas DAO. But we need to just make it happen and see after that. So we'll see if any of these episodes materialize. It's all based on what I can do with my time. Okay, sandbox spaces. Where do we normally gather? On the sandbox forums, especially the sandbox forum.sandboxdao.com. Also on Discord and the DAO discussion channel. You'll find us also on X, Twitter, hashtag SamFam, hashtag the Sandbox DAO, hashtag Sandbox Game. Arash Selective and Metaverse Editor are some pretty cool names within the Sandbox DAO space. And on YouTube, at the Sandbox DAO, which is where Digging the Sand podcast happens, Lancer YT, which is Sandbox DAO, or excuse me, the SANDDAO podcast, which is what you're watching and listening to right now. And Sand Fam Cafe hasn't been active in probably about a year, so I kind of struck them off the list, but love to see them return. For X Spaces, Mochaverse Hall is no longer happening each week, and neither is Coffee with Captain, as far as I can tell. It seems to have also been stood down, decommissioned, inactive. But Bulls on the Block on Saturday most certainly is, and we heard from Money earlier. Shout out to Money, who is frequently on Bulls on the Block, the X Space there. I believe they actually do it from BOTB Council now, if I'm not mistaken. So take a look at that handle there on Saturdays. Also, you could look at episode 7, where we interviewed the former owners of BOTB, Anthony and Crypto Sheep. Now the owner is Ernest, who also was the lawyer that we interviewed. Whale members still going on Tuesdays, where they do their whale talk. Episode 61 is when we interviewed them. They are art aficionados, very well known in the art industry, and have the Whale Vault, which is one of the most valuable most valuable art collections for NFTs, probably in the world. But we interviewed them in episode 61. Take a look. I was just listening to them the other day, and probably will tomorrow as well. They talk about crypto art every Tuesday on X. And now it's time to raid somebody. Let's see if there's anyone online that we can raid before we call it a night today. So this was episode 66. We really have done a lot. I mean, in all the episodes that we've done, there are a bunch of ones that really really stand out. And when I do a review of the SANDDAO podcast, which I will probably eventually do, it's one of my final episodes. I'll get to I'll go over all of that and all the cool episodes that we were able to do. But this mini series that we just did, the Foundation Company mini series, really holds a special place in my heart because they because of how much time, effort, energy, and overall how much we learned throughout this whole process. We learned a ton. So I really, really love this episode. I'm going to go ahead and finish my bold red here. We're going to call it a night. It's going to be a wrap. Thank you all for your time. Appreciate you. And I will see y'all in the next episode, whenever that may be. See you later, Sam Fam.
Doing it live, boys.